The following episode was originally recorded for a private podcast as part of the Equip for Life course. It has been edited for public release, but may reference training material from the Equip for Life course.
So something that's been on our list of topics for a while is how to handle discouragement, particularly at outreach. If you haven't done outreach before, it's a really overwhelming experience. It's really mentally tiring, and emotionally it can be really, really hard as well. Particularly if you have bad experiences, or particularly if you're an introvert, or both at the same time, kind of sucks. And we, as a staff, recently did our most recent outreach, and it was a doozy of an outreach. It was hard. It was really hard on, I think, all of us. And so we figured now's as good a time as any to bring up one of the most practical topics I think we could cover in terms of trying to help people prep for doing outreach, both for the sake of helping people to process and handle their difficult outreach experience as well. And also for the sake of, like, I hope the end result of this will be people being less scared of outreach. Like, okay, realistically, sometimes it's hard, but I don't think it ever has to be a devastating, you have to stop doing it kind of an experience. So let's talk about how to handle discouragement at outreach. Maybe we should start by talking a little bit about what happened recently.
Yeah, I'm expecting everyone's like, what happened? Like, if they
no one got assaulted. Guys. Like, I'm not trying to overinflate how difficult it was. It was tough.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So we went to Davidson University. Is this our first time?
Davidson College.
Davidson College. Is this our first time doing a private university or a private college? I feel like it is. I didn't know it was a private college until we were there. And there's like, oh, okay. That's good to know. It was really small, beautiful campus. Like, it's like, you know, it's outside of Charlotte. And so it's this gorgeous, like, brick buildings everywhere and lots of green. It's like a really, really pretty campus.
It's where Bethany and I got our Christmas card pictures taken last year. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah. So we were there, and it was... we definitely got a lot of pushback. It was a pretty interesting experience. So it's a pretty small campus, and it's a private college, and we were working with the Students for Life Club there. And so what we'd done is we had set up the pool table that we usually set up on the first day. Just should abortion remain legal? We, I guess, no, and it depends. We tried a different pool table sign the next day as a test because we like testing things. Didn't work. We can talk about that later, maybe. I don't know. But we did try a different thing on the next day. And I just want to describe a little bit about what the atmosphere on campus was like. I was impressed by how many people talked to us. It was raining on that first day. It was an awful day. Like we had like one of those like big tents, or we had a couple of them, but this big, pop-up canopy tent things. So it's not like people who were talking to us at the pool table were like getting drenched, but it was just a yucky day, and it was raining hard, or at least sometimes. And yet I was surprised by, like, we caused quite the stir on campus, and people were still, like, maybe sometimes angry enough at us they were still inclined to stop and engage us or give us a hard time or ask us some questions or whatever.
There were times where there was a line of like 6 people wanting to sign the yes, abortion should remain legal.
There was that too.
I don't think I've ever seen so many people just standing in line to sign the yes side of that poll table.
Standing in the rain. Like, it's not the whole line is under the canopy. It's not that big of a canopy.
They're willing to go to some trouble to make sure they get their vote in here.
Yeah.
I haven't tallied up the votes, but it's always very heavy on the yes side. And I would imagine this one was pretty overwhelming landslide.
Yeah, well, and if I imagine there was an overwhelming landslide, but I think part of the reason for that, as we saw, was a lot of people didn't want to sign the no side. Yeah. There was this interesting thing on campus where a lot of the pro-life students did not want to sign the poll table sign. And we didn't realize, I think probably that happens a little bit sometimes, especially if you've got kind of confrontational, aggressive pro-choice people like that. There's kind of a natural thing that can happen.
Yeah.
But it was more pronounced here. And so we started asking students about it. And so there's one student who came up, the Students for Life Club leader, Andrew, that we're training. He's a really cool student. He's super excited about the course. Here's awesome. So Andrew was, standing at the poll table wanting to engage in conversations. And some pro-life student that he knew comes up. Like, Andrew knew everybody on campus. It's a small campus. Like, I felt like everybody knew everybody. But this kid walks up this kid, this man, whatever, the student walks
He's a
up.
college student. He's a kid. He's a child. I'm just kidding.
The student walks up and he says, kind of quietly, kind of nervously, there's no one around. He's like, kind of like, I would sign the no thing. Like, I don't think abortion should be legal, but I don't want to sign it. Like, this is a small campus. I don't want people to see my name. And that's interesting. Like, we hadn't really thought a lot about that, about how, like, we're literally setting this up just like, we're just trying to get people to come and stop and talk to us. Like, this is kind of the thing that we've done. And I thought it was, like, really interesting that there was this kind of thing where, like, the thing about putting their name on the deal would be this kind of distracting thing.
At a university with 100,000 students,
it's not
that is not an issue.
Right.
It's so different.
When I have done outreach before on large college campuses, I never had anyone really question, like, well, what are you going to use this result for? And, well, someone could recognize my handwriting. I had a student say, someone could recognize my handwriting if I write down. I'm like, what?
Wow. Yeah.
This is so tiny, something so amazing. And they're like, well, I'm looking at this list of people who have signed their names, and I recognize their names. So this is definitely not anonymous.
Right.
Like, and there was just kind of this, like, temperament around the university that was very unique.
So it went even beyond this for the student, because he says, I would sign no, but I don't want anyone to see my name. And so I don't want to do the thing. And so Andrew, the club leader, says, well, you could just do what a bunch of other people said and sign anonymous. He looks at Andrew in the eyes and says, could you sign that for me?
Could you sign anonymous for me?
He says two things. He says, one, I don't want anyone to recognize my handwriting. And two, I don't want anyone to see me touch that pad. Like, if they're walking up to the table, if they see me over there signing anonymous, I'm going to feel like the negative consequences of that for who knows how long. Like, how
that's the
devastating,
incredible
is that? Like, this, like, and Andrew and I were talking about that later. It's like, this is where what identity politics gets us. Now we've got in the closet pro-lifers who don't want to say it because they're afraid of, like, what's going to happen. So anyway, so, like, that's kind of like, for us, we're all like, that's, like, really tragic, and it's also an amazing story. Like, like, as far as, like, a description, an example of how bad this is, we're going to be telling that as speeches for years to come.
That's true.
But I was talking about that, like, the first time I told that story in public was with these two pro-choice students later that day. They were kind of hanging out and kind of, like, asking about the poll and blah, blah, blah. What are we doing? And I told that story. Like, I forget exactly what kind of prompted it, but, they said something about how, they would imagine that probably there are a lot more pro-choice people than pro-life people here. And I said, yeah, there's actually this really interesting thing that happened earlier today. And I told this story, exactly what happened. How the kid, I don't want to even touch the pro-life, pad on the table. And they said, well, I suspect that I know one of the reasons for that. And I said, really? Do tell. And he said, yeah. So a year ago, there was a conservative club on campus that made this viral video. And what they had done was they had gone out doing one of these, kind of fake petition things that, like, like both sides of, like, a lot of issues have done this fake petition camera thing. It wasn't a hidden camera thing. I've seen hidden camera. There was like several years ago, I think probably some of the people listening to podcasts have seen this, where there was a student, they were taking petitions, like, to support fourth trimester abortions. And, like, but that was a hidden camera one, and, like, it was pretty shocking how many people were like, oh yeah, women's right to choose, like, that kind of thing. So anyway, so there's people have done this kind of a thing before, but this was not. They had the person with the camera is, several feet away from this happening. But what they were doing was they were going out and trying to get people in the top 10% of the GPA. We're going to we're going to sign a petition that says that the top 10 GPA students, some of their grades need to be redistributed to the bottom 10%, GPA students, to kind of make things a little bit more equal or whatever. And they had some students like, yeah, they're totally for that. In fact, you had, like, one student who was like, I don't have a very good grade, so yeah, I'm all for that. And then you get a lot of other students that are like, no, I think they ought to have to earn it. And you can obviously see the kind of point that they're trying to make here.
It's a funny point.
It's funny. It's not a perfect analogy. You can argue about, like, how much this is actually proof about anything, but they made this video.
And it's the kind of video that scores, like, kind of cheap points. And that's the kind of thing that really really angers the other side. People don't like having kind of cheap points scored against them.
Yeah, and that's what happened here. And so they said, like, them describe that the pro-choice kind of more, left-leaning students I was talking to describe what happened as a result of that video was really interesting. He said the level of anger against conservatives that rose to the surface as a result of that video. He actually used the word, I'll never forget this. He used the word napalm to describe like the level of heat regarding the anger as like an adjective, like napalm level anger rose to the top. And he said conservatives on this campus are still dealing with backlash. There was like, he had said it was a year ago. I think one of the other students said it was more like 6, 7, 8 months ago. So I don't know exactly how long it was, but I feel like the main thing that I took away from the entire outreach experience, and we talked about as a team during debrief, was that the ripple effect of what we do on campus is bigger than a lot of times I think we expect. I think a lot of times pro-life people will come onto a campus and do an outreach and feel like I'm having an effect for hopefully like a whole week. Like hopefully we'll be there for a couple of days and then people will still be talking about it. There'll be like, an article in the news, the college paper, and people will talk about it for a while, and then, kind of naturally things die down. It's not like this is the only topic that people are talking about. And that video happened somewhere between 8 and 12 months ago, and it's still having a huge effect on the campus. And in this case, I'd argue a negative impact. Like conservatives and, like the people on the right and the people on the left are talking to each other a lot less. And when they do, there's a lot more anger, at least coming from the left side of the campus, partially as a result of this video. I'm sure it's not just like it's never that simple. There's also probably a reaction to Trump, and there's all these other things, like people are angry right now. But like it really makes me pause to think like, okay, we should be so intentional and thoughtful about the things that we do when we go onto a campus, or if you're, a college club who's just going to do an outreach event. Like, you don't know how long it'll be after that day that the ripple effect, of the rock being thrown in the pond, like how big that ripple effect is and how much it's going to affect people. You might have people that are telling stories about your, the dialogue that they had with you for years to come. And it might really, really affect the way that they think about the entire issue or all the people on your side of an issue.
Yeah.
So I don't want that to be seen just as a negative thing. Ripple effects can be really, really positive. So when you have that positive interaction with an outreach table, hearing this like thing that happened with the video, I want that to be inspirational to those who want to do outreach on their campus, because it's not just the conversations you have that day. Maybe you have 15 conversations when you're all day at outreach, but those 15 people go and they all tell their individual friends about that amazing conversation they had with a pro-lifer.
Yeah.
This is an echoing ripple effect that we can have. And so I want to talk a little bit about things you can do to prepare yourself and your group before doing outreach, which will help make outreach a little bit better, especially if you encounter a difficult outreach like we did at Davidson College. Some of the things that can help like kind of prevent discouragement, or at least when you encounter discouragement, help you to manage it. So I also want to really stress, like, don't underestimate what outreach can do to you emotionally. So on one hand, I don't want to, discourage you from going out there and doing it. But I also want to prep people who have never done outreach before or have very little experience. Sometimes it can be really difficult. And so you want to prepare yourself for the possibility of that. And so this might mean getting a good night's sleep, making sure you have your coffee or a really good breakfast, or you bring snacks or whatever you need to do. Or if you're a Christian, maybe you need to really pray before you go and you do outreach. So doing that sort of thing, prepare for possible challenging conversations that can really make a difference. And I think one of the reasons for me, the first day of outreach was really difficult is because I actually didn't do my usual stuff I did before doing an outreach table. So I missed my morning prayer. We didn't pray as a team, or I didn't pray individually. And so that really like threw me off. And I didn't feel like I was as well rested as I would want to and be like really on top of it. So for me personally, that was a struggle. And I did those things the next day. And so the next day of outreach, at least I was a little bit more on my 2 feet. But another really important thing that I think helped the ERI staff when we were doing this outreach was that we know each other and we know how to kind of be a support system for each other.
Yeah.
And so if you know your team and you know yourself, and so you know when to take breaks, when to externally process something difficult that happened with another person you're there at the outreach with, that sort of kind of comfortable knowledge and connection you have as a unit is going to make you a lot more effective, and it's going to help with discouragement. So I kind of want to just put those two things out there right now before we kind of launch into all of the other material.
Yeah, so you're touching on some of the things that I'm very concerned about in particular. So one of the points that I was going to make was very much try to help each other as a team, and definitely that includes like emotionally processing. If one of your team members has had a tough experience and they need to externally process, that's really important. But also, like, if you're working together well as a team and you're being mindful of difficult situations popping up, you can really make those situations less harmful. So we have multiple issues at this recent outreach where the fact that we were like being mindful of each other, we were able to help each other out. So like there was one time in particular where Rachel was having a conversation with a woman who had a personal experience with abortion, and it was getting kind of personal. And Josh was like nearby and could hear what was going on, and he saw one of the pro-life students was just walking up to the conversation, not knowing what was going on. It's not his fault.
Right.
So Josh kind of got his attention and pulled him aside, kind of intercepted him to prevent him from joining a conversation that really it was better off for that to be just Rachel and this girl.
Right.
So that's an example of a team member working well to support the other one. It's kind of an assist in that situation. There's another situation that, in retrospect, we as a team didn't work together as well as it would have been best for us to, which is the situation with the girl with the umbrella. I spent a lot of time processing that with Jacob and the whole team for that matter. It's one of my kind of hard conversations. And one of the reasons that conversation was so hard was that it was a complicated mess where I was having a conversation with one student and we've been talking for a long time and it was going really well. And this girl with the umbrella showed up and started kind of getting in my face for the fact that we were talking about what the unborn is. It was like, you don't care about women and you don't care about women's circumstances. It's like, well, you're coming in like in the middle of a conversation. And she was very, very difficult to work with because she was very hostile and very aggressive. She's also like, this is really personal and it was really emotional for her. Right. Basically, everyone on our team independently came to the conclusion she's probably post-abortive. But because of the dynamic of we're at the table and there's like 4 other people standing right there, that made it impossible for me to have that conversation in a way that's going to be more like emotionally calming down, letting her share at more of a personal level, because she was like lobbing attacks at me and there's other people around. And so it was a really, really messy situation. And I did the best that I could given the circumstances. But as I was processing with Jacob, trying to figure, okay, what could we have possibly done different here? One of his thoughts was other team members should have gotten other people away. Somehow or other, the fact that there was a group with her was a big problem. And because her initial impression of me was this jerky guy who doesn't care about women because I'm talking about the unborn in a conversation that has been going on for half an hour and she didn't see that half an hour. I couldn't say to her, hey, there's a group here. You want to go talk one-on-one? Like, she was already upset with me.
Right.
We didn't have the rapport for that to be possible.
Right.
And so given that, I was pretty stuck. And that's an area where, like, so I'm not mad, but like 2020 hindsight, that's an example of if there's a group around a conversation that's better for it to be just one, help your team out, pull people away if necessary.
It's really interesting. So I literally did the opposite of that. I sent Rachel over there. I added a team member because I could hear like towards the beginning when she first stopped, her attacks were so personal about you. She felt like you were this bad person who doesn't care about women. And so like Rachel and I had just been talking and kind of debriefing from the last thing that had happened. And I told Rachel, like, I want you to go over there and just be near Tim because it might be helpful for you to jump in and defend him basically like as like a non-woman hating like person. Simple. I don't know exactly what will be the best thing, but just being there as opposed to just being this one woman and there's all these, like pro-life guys around. And so, that's interesting. I think
that's another way of responding to it. The problem was that Rachel was never able to be that helpful to me. Like what Rachel, I think, ended up doing was she kind of took over the conversation that I was having with the other guy at one point.
Yeah.
Which was good. That was a good thing.
Yeah.
But like if Rachel had been able to like direct her and like have her talking to her instead and then have that be a one-on-one conversation. That would have been fine too. But as it happens, I just still ended up with all these other pro-lifers watching, and so she's defensive and it's personal and not very productive.
That's a really good point.
In general, for most students for life groups, it probably, unless you have someone, that is more or less, stuff like from an ERI staff or another situation that's similar, it's majority of the time it's going to be good to bring people away than bring someone else in.
Yes.
It's really hard is like, if you're, like a female pro-life student and your friend is over there and he's trying his best with a really tough conversation, I would say majority of the time you jumping in isn't probably going to be helpful. That's a really difficult move.
Yes.
It was kind of like a judgment call move I couldn't even make in that situation, to jump in like on Tim's behalf or try to, kind of get in there. It just didn't seem like it was feasible. So I chose to take, the guy that you were talking with kind of away and have a conversation with him, because that guy was awesome. Yeah. And where you guys were at in the conversation.
We're having a good conversation.
So I decided to kind of take him away. But I would say if you're a pro-life college student, most of the time your best move is going to be to de-escalate by removing the crowd if there is a crowd.
Yeah. And to be clear, my view is not that like our team made obvious errors, but more like this was a devil of a situation. It was a horrible, complicated, accidental mess. This is like the perfect storm of things going wrong all at one time. And given that, like we were kind of doing our best, and like in retrospect, this is a thing that could have worked,
right?
But it wasn't obvious what we should have done.
There's something cool that can happen. Like this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important for clubs to debrief, like after each outreach, and kind of talk through these different things, because you're going to get better as a team working together the more you do this and the more you're talking about this. Like I feel like this is the kind of thing that I experience when I'm on bands, like literally like music bands, is the more that we play together, we kind of start figuring out what are each other's strengths and weaknesses and how can we kind of help each other out and not step on each other's musical toes and different things like that. And sometimes this takes that time. But if you're debriefing and talking about these different issues, all right, here's this kind of situation that happened with the girl with the umbrella. Here's how I would have wanted everyone to handle it in a perfect universe. Like that kind of helps everyone to figure out, all right, like now you can, now the second outreach can be better than the first one. And it's going to like advance the kind of the growth and the maturing of the group really well, so that instead of it just being like, oh, that was a rough outreach, it can be like, okay, that was pretty good. We can even make it better next time. So here's some different things that we can talk about. So I think that having those debrief sessions, don't just leave the campus really because you've taken down your umbrella and your pool table. Like you all need to take that stuff down. Definitely take that stuff down, because you can't debrief while people keep on coming up to talk to you. But take that stuff down and then go find a table to sit around, or sit around on the grass or whatever, and spend like a half an hour talking about that experience, so you can learn as much as you can from it. And it's also going to be encouraging for everyone. If you've had a bad outreach, like sharing with each other, I think can also be an encouraging thing for the different group members.
Yeah. Something else that I wanted to say, just kind of jump off of what Rachel said earlier. Rachel commented on the importance of like taking breaks and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that is like one of the most important things for me when I'm doing outreach. And I learned this one the hard way. I've told this story a number of times in like private context. I don't think I've ever told it on the podcast. My first college campus outreach experience was my freshman year of college. It's 2006, early 2007, with Justice for All. So a good number of years before I ended up working for them. And my pro-life club at the time at Biola drove a number of hours to do 4 straight days of outreach with JFA at University of Arizona before the start of our second semester. And it was a really good experience in a lot of ways, and I had a lot of really good conversations. But I was like less emotionally balanced at that point in my life. And the attitude that I had, the mindset that I had going into this conversation was, I have to be like, every second is so valuable and important. I can't lose a single opportunity. If there's a given person that I could talk to and I don't talk to them, then maybe they're going to get an abortion, and then it's going to be on me because I could have talked to them. And I think that's a natural attitude to have, or a perspective to have as a pro-life person. The stakes are really high here, but that is the kind of perspective that will kill you. And I ran myself ragged for 3 days. And I'm an introvert now, and I was way more introverted then. And I did not take good emotional care of myself. And so by day 4, like somewhat early in day 4, I had a, like, not even that bad a conversation, but kind of an awkward conversation. And all of a sudden, I completely emotionally shut down, and I was non-functional for the rest of that day. And so I've been very, very intentional, both for myself and for other people, trying to encourage them. Like, if you need a break, take a break, process. Really try to find out where your lines are. When you need a break, take a break, and don't let the but you could have another conversation thing drive you to burning yourself out. I would rather you be a little, like, have one fewer or two fewer conversations than you could have possibly had, and be emotionally healthy as a result of it, and be able to keep on doing it. Do not let yourself burn out.
And I think that when you have more experience at outreach, you kind of build up a little bit of a stamina. You maybe can process more quickly, or you can have more conversations than if you're more of a green pro-life,
Yeah, that's true.
outreach person. But at the same time, doesn't matter how much you've done this, it's going to emotionally wear you out.
Yeah.
And that's just because we're people and because we care. And this is something which is really personal and difficult to talk about.
It'll physically wear you out too. And so, like, I so agree with this point. I think it's really important, and I agree that it's kind of not the pro-life instinct. The pro-life instinct is, this is the most important 6 hours of my month, or something, or
Right.
something like that. But like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I'm hoping you as a club are going to do like 20 outreaches or something
Right.
like that, and not just one. I remember the impact. I've never told this story before. I don't even think I've told this story privately. I was just thinking about kind of the impact that it had on me, where a pro-life leader basically tried to teach me the opposite lesson of what we're trying to teach here. And I don't know how much of an impact this has had on me, like really trying to help our team to be healthy, but certainly this is not the way to do it. I remember, I'm not going to name the pro-life group, but there's a pro-life group that I partnered with to do an outreach with, and I've done that with several pro-life groups, so don't just assume that you know what I'm talking about. I've done that with a lot of different pro-life groups to see, I'm going to do outreach with you this time. I'll do outreach with you and see what you do. But they had set up a thing. It was just going to be a couple of days at this campus. And the second day, I was having a lot harder time than I did the first day. And I had a really bad headache that day. I don't get migraines very often. I don't know if that was specifically migraine, but I was in a lot of pain. And I had some weird, I don't know why, but I was like really nauseous. And just like, so I was just like sick. And so I spent probably a couple of hours of that day, basically, like, there was like, they'd set up near kind of this like amphitheater thing. So there's like all these kind of stone steps. I've seen this on a bunch of campuses. And sometimes this is where people, if like there's not a concert going on, this is like where people are eating. And so I basically went over there because I could be sitting down a lot, and that was more comfortable because of my nausea. But also sometimes I was able to, like, I would strategically position myself towards like next to students that I thought I might be able to get a conversation with. And I got a few conversations where we're kind of talking about that stuff going on over there. Like, it's not right next to this pro-life thing that they've set up, but it's like, you could see it. And so I'm having some conversations when I could, but I also just, like, I wasn't physically able to stand all day. And so anyway, so at some point I felt better, and I went back and kind of joined the team, and we did our thing. And at some point we took everything down, and we're just kind of transporting everything over to the parking lot. And I remember asking the pro-life leader, like, how do you think outreach went? Like, is there anything that you feel like, could have been better? Like, I'm here to learn, feel free, like, talk to me. And he makes this really passive aggressive comment that was so not subtle about, I don't, this isn't exactly what he said because I don't remember it well enough to give it like exact quote, but it was basically, I really wish that when pro-life people did outreach with us, that they would take this rare kind of experience more seriously. Wow. And that they would just like work through and not take so many breaks, and they would just like just do this thing. And it was clearly pointed at me, and I felt terrible. I was crushed. I really respected that guy, and I basically tried to defend myself. Where it's like I was really sick, I tried to explain, but that's what not to do as a pro-life leader. Like, I think that's a really good man. There's a lot of good things about that man that I still respect, but like that's not the move. If you're the pro-life club leader, you need to be thinking long-term health for your students, because outreach is so hard, and you got to take that seriously, and you want your students coming back to do future outreaches, which means you can't be a slave driver.
And of course, on the other hand, you can be too lazy. Like
Yes.
don't be lazy.
Sure.
The moderation is where the virtue is.
Yes.
But I think if anything, I would err on the side of it. If you've got a club member that's sitting down and struggling and processing, I'm gonna err on the side of assuming they know their emotional health and their emotional situation better than I do.
Yeah. A lot of this kind of leads into one of the points that I wanted to make today, which is just to be kind to yourself. What we're talking about right now has been like, here's some ways to be kind to yourself and to your fellow students, your team on that day. But when I wrote that down, like I also meant like in the days following. Like I think a lot of times you need to figure out like how much time can you kind of take off in the days following. Like I knew at Davidson that you, Tim, and you, Rachel, specifically had really bad days. Jacob and I didn't struggle as much those days because we didn't deal with the nasty students. They happened to be attracted to you, or at least the nastiest of the students and the hardest experiences. And so like for me, I'm thinking like, all right, how can Tim not be working really hard for the next couple of days so you can just like kind of process and just once again kind of thinking about that marathon? And I think that's hard for a lot of the kinds of people who tend to end up being club leaders, because if you're a club leader, it means you work really hard and you're motivated and you're passionate and like all those different things. This is why entrepreneurs get burnt out really fast, because you're like, I know this is really important, so I'm going to work 10, 12 hours a day. I'm doing this thing, and then you get burnt out, and then you're like useless for years or something like that in the worst case scenarios. You don't want that. You don't want that for you. You don't want that for your team. And so be kind to yourself, be kind to your team in the days to follow. In like your next club meeting should probably just be about that outreach, and it's more debrief time, which is good even for the students who didn't come to the outreach, because they should have been at the outreach if they possibly could have made it. And so good for them to hear about some of the cool things that happened, but also good to let everyone process and be a leader for them in that situation.
The meetings that I had after outreaches when I was a student leader, the beginning of the meeting was just debrief. And it was like, for the students who were at the outreach, tell your outreach stories and everyone else is going to listen. And that helped the next time we were doing outreach. The students who hadn't done it before, they were newer to the club, they weren't able to make it to the older outreaches, they'd heard the stories, and that motivated them to get involved. Yeah. So if you're having trouble getting everyone to sign up for your time slots for your table, you need to be doing more debrief as a big group in front of the students who haven't been in outreach before. So like that's going to work twofold for you, because it's both preserving emotional health and helping people to process and understand what other students are going through, but it's also going to help with motivation.
Yeah, there's another reason that I think that helps, and that gets into another thing that I was going to talk about, which is to talk to God about what you're experiencing and also talk to each other. And one of the reasons for that is this thing. So Tim got me listening to Jordan Peterson lately. Jordan Peterson is from the University of Toronto. He's a psychology professor. He's like an expert specifically in the area of like personality part of psychology. And I make that point because he's distinguished, but like there's different fields of psychology, and he feels like some of them are like in the academic world completely taken over by stupid stuff. But like his field is still fairly preserved, I guess. And so anyway,
he's a really interesting person.
He's a very interesting person. I don't agree with him on everything that he says, but he has a lot of interesting research that he's done. And so I don't know enough about this to talk about this as an expert, but I'm going to do my best to make a point that I've heard him make about that relates to why it's so helpful to be talking about this. He says, like, when you have bad memories and bad experiences, things that still affect you emotionally, it means that you still haven't fully dealt with those memories. And one of the ways that you deal with those memories is by talking about it. There's this thing, he said, they've been able to show at like a neurological level, like there's a rewiring of your brain that happens as you process out your memories out loud and analyze them. And like there's this thing that goes on. I don't understand all of that and exactly what is going on, but like this is part of why talk therapy helps so much, is like you're working with an expert that is helping you tell your story, tell the story of what has happened, partially because they understand what's going on at the neurological level and what kinds of questions to ask you to help you lead to talking about them in a way that's actually going to help you kind of deal with these memories and be healthier in the future. Another thing that relates to like the actual day itself, as you're thinking about like when you have the tough experiences with people, when you talk to tough people, Keep in mind that even though you might have just had a tough experience with this person, they might still be better off for it. I've got a couple of stories about that. One of them was from Davidson, but one of them was from Winthrop. We were at Winthrop University in South Carolina. Our team did kind of one of these ERI kind of only outreaches where we just kind of went mainly to work together and do R&D and try some stuff. And we had a generally good outreach, but Jacob ended up telling me the story during our debrief session. Like, I had a terrible morning. Like, that was awful because like instantly somehow Tim and Rachel are immediately in conversations, and just at least it felt like to me that you guys were always in great conversations. And I was the like lone guy outside the pool table, being the salesman, like trying to get people like who are walking by to, hey, you want to sign our pool table? And I'm having to deal with rejection like 40 times in a row. It's just like awful. It's just like, I'm hating this. I want to have actual conversations, and everyone is just ignoring me or pretending I don't even exist because they don't want to make eye contact because they're afraid I'm going to, I don't know, do something negative if they make eye contact with me. And so I'm that guy. It's just like a bad morning. But at some point, like, I had welcomed someone, hey, you want to sign our poll? You know, he was like, and I guess he had actually responded with something like, no, I've got class. And I probably said, well, we'll be here until, 3-ish or love for you to come back and share your opinions with us. And he was like, all right, whatever. And he goes in. Well, I didn't even realize it because I think I got stuck in a conversation that afternoon. But that dude came back and he ended up talking to Jacob. And they had this great conversation. And I don't remember all the details about the conversation. It doesn't really matter. But during debrief, he said, I saw that guy like get welcomed by Josh in the beginning of the day. And I think that might be the reason he came back is we seemed so warm. Like, even though we were being rejected, like we're smiling, we're having good conversations. And he did come back and he had a great conversation and I just wasn't aware of it until later. A more extreme case happened here at Davidson though last week when I talked to, I don't know if we want to say his actual name. You know who I'm talking about. What should we call? We'll call him Carl. So I talked to Carl on day one, and it was a terrible conversation. He was like Captain Apathy, like just like he like his eyes are always like, when like you see animated characters that look apathetic, like they're half closed, like they're just like they don't care. Like that's how he looks the entire time. I'm trying to get him engaged, and he's just like meh. It's just like his attitude of the entire conversation, and I'm trying to get him to care. I do my whole thing about, this issue matters even if pro-choice people are right. If pro-choice people are right, then I'm trying to make a medical procedure illegal and more dangerous. And if pro-lifers are right, there's 3,000 kids being killed. Like, it matters either way. And he's like, meh, it's just like, he's not literally saying meh, but that's like the tone of everything he says. It's just like, just whatever, man, I don't think anything really matters in the end. I don't care. I definitely don't care about anything. And it's like, wow.
It was a long conversation. He was there for a while. This wasn't a 2-minute, oh, well, that guy's apathetic.
Yeah, like he was apathetic about everything except talking to me. Like usually apathetic people don't hang out because they're apathetic. They've got a better thing to do, like play video games or something. But no, he was like apathetic, but with nothing better to do than hang out under our canopy and not get rained on, I guess. And so I'm sucked into this never-ending pointless conversation, and I'm just like, get me out of this. And so anyway, finally he leaves, and I was just like, all right, that was pointless. Like, I'm never using the pictures from that conversation because I don't even want to imply like anything happened there that mattered. But he showed up on day 2. Like it was weird. We didn't talk to as many people on day 2, even though it was a beautiful day. It was a gorgeous day on campus, like perfect weather.
We had an inferior outreach sign too.
We did have a failed full table test we were doing, and then I think probably class schedule. I think there are just a lot more students just there on Monday than Tuesday. But anyway, he came back. I saw him. I was like, ooh, I'm staying away from him. It's like, oh, there's no way.
I don't think I told you how our conversation started.
I didn't hear about it.
I was just observing one of the volunteers, and like I'm not talking. I'm not like right in the conversation, but I'm like near enough that I can observe it. Carl walks right up to me and stands right next to me. Like, this wasn't even so. It's like, hey, you want to talk? Like, he just walks up, stands right next to me. And
like now you're both observing the volunteers together.
kind of, and it was a little bit awkward. Even it's like that was like he's like really forward. It's like hi, what he didn't say out loud, but like basically it's like I want to talk. It's like all right, and so I kind of awkwardly started talking to him. And it was my second best conversation of the whole outreach. It was great. It went on for a long time, and I mean, just really, really interesting things happened in that conversation, and it ended with him basically changing his mind on abortion.
I can't believe I saw you guys talking. I was like, hell no, I'm not going over. I'm staying way away.
He was fascinating. That's a whole different story. I can't go into it because it's a total change topic. But it was really interesting for me because my two best conversations that outreach, one was on day one, was on day two, were both situations where one of my team members set it up in some way or another. In the case of Carl, you basically forced him to deal with the fact that his apathy didn't make sense, and it took him time, and he processed, and then finally day two he came back and was ready to process and talk about abortion. So that was a huge setup, and it's awesome. And it's, the other one in Jacob's case. The guy that I was talking with is like Mr. Philosophy name dropper guy, like the worst name dropper ever. He's so annoying. And Jacob built all this rapport with him for like an hour. Finally, okay, he's name dropping too much. He called me over, and I inherited this beautiful conversation with a super friendly, lots of rapport guy. And that was my best conversation of the whole outreach. And so definitely there can be benefit from the setup. And in some cases, you don't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So the whole point here being, remember that you might be the one on the volleyball team who is setting people up to spike it. And it's not that fun being the setup person. My experience, and this has happened to me before at other outreaches, like apparently I'm really good at like getting nasty people to like drain all their nastiness all over me and kind of deal with that so that then they can go have a great conversation with someone else. Like, that's fine, but it's certainly helpful if you can find out like the part two of the story during a debrief session.
And this really does happen. My friend Leah is an amazing dialoguer. She does a wonderful job, and she's still a student. And she has this person, I don't even know his name. I need to talk with her and get the details all about exactly what's been going on with this guy. But every time their Students for Life group sets up a table, he comes and he like finds them, and he like, I don't think he's completely changed his mind on abortion yet. I think that he's still kind of working through like all of his belief systems with her, but he'll come looking for her and be like, is Leah going to be here today? What time is she going to be here?
Wow. That's so nice.
Do you guys want to talk with me while I wait for her to come?
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
And so this really does happen. You leave an impression on someone and they want more. I think that this is like evidence that this actually, and I've had that happen where I'll talk to someone in, the winter of this year, and then next year they like see me in a different spring outreach, and you just kind of run into people on your college campus, and you've interacted with them before, or even sometimes someone will come up to you. You have a class with them. They had no idea you were in the pro-life club, but like you've built some rapport and just leave an impression on people. It affects everything.
This is why I'm so passionate about relational apologetics, is you're going to have more of an impact on a person in your fifth conversation about a topic than your first conversation, like basically every single time if you can get the 5 conversations. And like naturally, when we talk about relational apologetics, I'm usually thinking more about adults trying to go and get coffee with people. But like I've talked about this with student clubs, like this is one of the reasons why doing outreach well is so important, and doing it early. Don't be waiting like 3 years of club meetings before you do your first outreach. My gosh, like get through the course and go and do outreach like soon, because I want you doing outreach every couple of weeks or at least once a month, because you have this opportunity that we don't usually have at ERI. Yeah. Like unless we go to Davidson College every month, which we're not, but unless we did that,
maybe never again.
Maybe, like we're not going to be able to have those things where people are like, I want to find Tim. Like is Tim here? Like that kind of thing. But it's very natural. If you're the club, if you're students on the campus, for people to be like, where's Leah? I want to talk to Leah for the 4th time. I talk to her every time. Like whenever I see that pool table, I'm going to go and find Leah, because I know she's there and she's awesome. You can have that impact, especially if you're having outreaches fairly regularly.
Well, one other point that I wanted to make about these two conversations, my good experiences, is it's helpful to when you have bad experiences to lean on those good experiences. And I know this isn't always possible because sometimes you just have bad days and you don't really have good conversations. You just kind of have some mediocre ones and a negative one or two. But on the occasions where you do have good ones, like try to think of the bad experiences as being kind of the cost of the good experiences. Like in order for those good experiences to happen, those good conversations to happen, you got to put yourself out there, and you never know what you're going to get. And sometimes that means you're going to get these difficult situations. My other like really bad conversation, it was another just like horrible perfect storm, everything going wrong. Everyone else had gone to lunch. It was just me and one female volunteer. She went to the bathroom for 3 minutes, and in that 3 minutes I'm the only guy at this table, and this woman came over, and it's just very, very difficult to deal with because I'm a man. It's like,
so the key point is don't go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that's not what I mean. This is like I had some unlucky situations, but I just like processing that one when she came back. It's like try to think in terms of like I've had some amazing things happen. Like what happened with Carl was really cool. Like his mind changed. It took a lot of work, and it was an interesting conversation. The other guy, it ended with me sharing my faith more passionately and confidently and joyfully than I ever have before. It was a really meaningful experience, and that kind of helped me to kind of carry through some of the negative stuff. So if you have those positive things, don't just focus on the negative, process the negative, but also be intentional about being thankful for the positive.
You've also got to keep in mind that, again, like you don't always know the good impact that you're having. And so there's a sort of like I think this can be taken too far, but I think it's fair to assume that if you're being kind to people, if you're hearing people, then you're having a kind of a good impact that sometimes is just not obvious. Sometimes people aren't showing you the effect that you're having on them. And it's only sometimes that they're going to come back and talk to you about that later. So we had, when we did Fresno 40 Days for Life at the organization that I used to work for in California, I had led the first one. But then after that, we had someone else take it over because it's just not my skill set. And so it was on, I don't know if it was the second year or maybe the third year, but at some point I wasn't there at the time, but I heard about it. You know, we had volunteers out there 12 hours a day, and someone came up to our volunteer leader pushing a baby stroller and said, I wanted to come here today to tell you about my baby. I came here to have an abortion with this baby exactly a year ago. And it was because you guys were out there that I didn't have an abortion. But I didn't say that to anybody. I didn't talk to any of you. I just left. And I had this baby. And I felt like it would probably be nice to let you guys know. And so I brought my baby here. Want to take a picture? Like that kind of thing. It was like really encouraging. But like that happens a lot. Is you're going to have an impact on people. And sometimes people like don't tell you because they just move on, or maybe they don't find you, or maybe they're just not thinking that it would be nice for them to let you know. Like they might be a little bit clueless about how emotionally hard an outreach can be. But you need to remember, like if you're being kind and if you're hearing people and occasionally making good arguments, like that's kind of minimum for me. If you're doing that, you're having a good impact on people, but sometimes it's not going to be obvious, and you need to remind yourself of that. I actually, and I've said before, I suspect God hides from us some of the impact that we have, maybe most of the impact we have, because maybe if we were really in tune with, like, if we were really omniscient about all of the impact, like the good in the world that we're doing, our heads would get really, really big, and it would like have this bad negative effect on us. And so I think it's worthwhile kind of, realizing sometimes you're going to have a good impact on people and you're just not going to know about it. I think it's also important to get in touch. This is like kind of leadership jargon. I'm going to try to explain a little bit what it means, but there's this idea that's talked about a lot in like leadership books, which is to get in touch with your why, which just means like, why are you doing this? You're not doing this you're certainly not doing outreach because you're thinking it's going to have like this huge like positive emotional impact on you that day, at least not after the first outreach. Like it's not usually the easiest, most fun thing ever to do is go talk to people about a controversial subject. Why are you doing this? Because babies are getting legally killed. Like we're in this crazy time in history where it's legal to kill babies. Like I hope one day everyone looks back and is like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that was legal, but that's our time right now. And so what can we do about it? Like, I'm glad that this is the worst that we have to deal with. Like, it's not like we're having to, we're doing the White Rose Project, putting up propaganda, hoping not to get executed for it. Like, it could be worse, obviously, but it's still hard. And if like we're always thinking about things at kind of the micro level, like here's the experiences that we just had, and not stopping and looking at the macro level, like why are we even doing this? It's going to be a lot easier to get discouraged, because at the micro level, sometimes we're just going to have hard experiences, and it's worth it because of the macro thing, because of how significant and important it is for us to be trying to have an impact. And like we're literally trying to save lives by changing minds. You're talking to people who are not only sometimes post-abortive, you're talking to pre-abortive people. You're talking to people who might find out that they're getting, like, that they're pregnant in 3 months. And the conversation that they have with you might be the thing that turns that around, that literally makes it so this baby is going to live and not die. And again, they might not tell you that, but like your club might directly be involved in saving lives and you don't even know it. So I think you as a leader, especially reminding people regularly, like, once a month or two, you need to like have a quick, like, all right, let's get in touch with our why again, even just for a couple of minutes. Talk about that, so the club isn't just kind of focused on just the minutia of all the different, we got to put flyers up for this event, or we need to raise the funding so we can have the speaker come, or we need to make new poll table signs, or like all that stuff. It's easy to get distracted by that. But if you do that, then you're not thinking about like, okay, why are we even doing this in the first place? And that kind of relates to the last thing that I wanted to say, which is like, so I want to talk to club leaders right now. If you're a club leader, outreaches are an opportunity for you to grow as a leader and to help your club through this. Like you don't want the result of an outreach is that everyone leaves discouraged. And so, there's something that you ought to do before. In fact, I think Rachel wrote about this in her outreach tips article that we'll link to. But, we're talking about like setting the expectations low. If everyone's expecting, the reason we're doing outreach is because we're going to have someone tell us that they're not going to have an abortion next week. That's the wrong because that almost never happens.
Set yourself up for disappointment.
Almost never happens. So set the expectations low. Like the goal for everybody is to have one conversation. That's the goal. Because then at the end, during debrief, you can have everyone at the very beginning. All right, how many of you had one conversation? And basically, unless something disastrous happened, almost everyone's going to raise their hand, unless they were only there for a half an hour or something like that. Okay, we've now all met our goal. How many people had 2 or 3 conversations? A lot of hands are still going to go up. Okay, you've all now exceeded expectations. But you've got to set the expectations not like crazy low, but like realistically low. Like if you've got 20 students there, you're not all going to be able to have 10 conversations that day. And that's like just like normal. So you set the expectations low and then celebrate the victories. And you need to be really intentional about helping to lead people through celebrating the victories. So if you're a club leader and you have not read John Maxwell's, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, that's probably the second most important thing you could do for your club, after obviously taking your club through the Equip for Life course. And obviously that's the most important thing. But the second most important thing, you need to buy John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership book, because it changed my life. Quickly, years ago, I did not want to read leadership books. I didn't think of myself as a leader. I was leading a podcast. I was leading volunteers and staff, but I didn't think of myself as a leader. I thought of myself as like a project manager. I had the wrong view about it. And then my boss said, I want you to read this book. And I was like, oh, I don't want to read that book. It's dumb. This doesn't affect me. I'm never going to be a leader. I'm just going to be a speaker, writer guy. It's just like I'm going to be in my happy place and have other people always leading. And then I read the book, and it completely affected me. I don't know that I would have been willing to let's start a nonprofit and put me at the helm if I hadn't read that book. And so if you're a club leader, you are a leader. You're a leader already. Now it's the question, are you going to be a good leader or a bad leader? So how do you become a better leader? That book would be at least a good starting point. I know John Maxwell, it's almost cliche to talk about, because when you Google leadership, he comes up and all of his leadership books come up, but there's a reason for that. He's a little bit cheesy sometimes, but he's got a lot of really good things to say. And I just encourage you, this is an opportunity for you to be able to lead your club really well, and for them to be more excited about following you into the heat of battle in the future outreaches, because they know that they're going to be led well and they're going to be taken care of.